Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. Hey, Lydia.
Hi, Bridget. Every time you're here, I'm like, she's back.
We're here. We're live. So glad to be here with you. You actually came up with today's very fun topic.
I did. So recently, I've been seeing a lot of podcasts asking guests to pay to be on their show.
Mm.
And so I wanted to talk about the big question of should you have your guests pay to be on your show? And also, should guests pay to be on shows? And so I want to kind of like go through this and debunk like when it's appropriate to pay for a podcast versus when it's not. And these are my personal opinions. You can have different ones, and that is okay. But and I think Bridget and I shared the same exact opinion on this. But yeah, we just have like a very wider view of why maybe somebody wouldn't pay because of the long term of relationships.
Yeah, you wrote like a really, really good LinkedIn, and it will be like an email as well. So everyone head over to Lydia's LinkedIn because she was dropping knowledge the other day on this topic. And I'm curious, have you ever paid for a podcast, or have any of your clients ever paid to be on a show?
So none of my clients have paid for a show. However, I do mostly represent like service-based businesses and experts, but it is not uncommon for a product brand to pay to be on a show. However, that is because they're talking more about their product, which kind of turns into like an advertising placement. So I wouldn't necessarily call it like a guest paying to be on the show versus like more of your ad budget.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to think if I have ever
Yeah,
paid
have you?
to be on a podcast. Not a podcast, but I remember it was probably like 5 years ago. I didn't really understand these like summits and like the online summit thing. And I was like, oh, I want to pay I'll pay $250 to speak. And you know what? Sometimes it's good to rip the band-aid off. So I do think like if you are a person who needs to get your feet in the water, and maybe paying for something is going to make you have skin in the game to actually show up for it and you're like dead scared or whatever, maybe it's for you. But there are a lot of like reasons, which we're about to talk about in a moment, where that doesn't really make sense. And a lot of it has to do with audience, because this is what Lydia sees all the time. And she even wrote it in this little article. Lydia wrote this article on LinkedIn. There
I
are
basically did.
systems that track everything. And Lydia can see, we can see, does that podcast have a big audience? So yeah, you kind of dive into this because I think this is like the most important piece of would you pay, would you not pay?
Yeah, I feel like a little LinkedIn rant is just like necessary. It's just like necessary sometimes because it does ruffle feathers, right? I have a very like PR opinion on it, but I also have an opinion as a business owner. And I just see the long-term growth of like not having your guests pay. We run a podcast, so we definitely have a biased view of this, but we'll go into like why. So again, recently I've seen a lot of podcasts wanting to charge, and their response will be the same. It's always like, well, in order to produce the best quality possible and bring on the best guests, we are asking for and they'll call it like a sponsorship, like a little like fee based. One of them called it like a processing fee. I was like, what exactly are we processing? Like just like very like interesting ways of going about it to ask for payment. And I want to let's first talk about like why I think this isn't a good idea for experts. So, when you are going on a show and you already like paid money, what are the intention? Like, what are your, I guess, like the expectations? So, number one, the guest probably is going, if they paid like hundreds of dollars, sometimes even thousands, their expectation is probably like, this is going to bring me money or it's going to
Yeah.
bring me clients. And so, if they don't get an ROI on being on this show, they're going to get upset.
Totally. And I think, like you said, it does set a different tone because it's an exchange of money, which is like a service exchange, versus a free exchange of value, which is what you and I talk about all the time. And not to mention, we love our podcast because of the deep, deep relationships that have been built from the show. We do not charge anything. We don't even have ads at this point. I think we do our own ads. You know,
We
we're
do.
promoting our own, promoting our own products here. but the relationships are so, so deep. And like we said before we started this, like relationships can't be bought. So if you do have a smarter, longer term approach to podcasting and like why building that network and building the relationship is important, there's no need to exchange money because it does set a different, it is different. And you are right. Like we've done this, right? Where we have advertised on different, we've paid to advertise on different platforms, I guess, or mediums, or I don't even know what we'd call it. And we
Yeah.
have not gotten something in return. And we were like, damn, that sucked.
That was always funny. We were literally just talking about it before this podcast. We're like, remember when we spent X amount of dollars on this ad and that was like the worst money we spent of 2024? It's fine though. We live and we learn.
The ad was
But
so good too. I was like so proud of the ad.
the ad was awesome.
The ad was so good.
But if somebody were to pay to be on a show, not only are they looking at it from a different lens of like, is this going to give me a big ROI? But in addition to that, they're also probably going to go on and have like a different energy towards it. Like you're not going to go on and like meet somebody and be like, "Ooh, I'm going to refer them business. I'm going to do all this and that." La 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 la. It's more like, "Okay, this is a business exchange and we're going to just keep it at that." And I've seen that relationship be built on that type of foundation where it doesn't feel as like friendly. Whereas if you invite somebody on for free, you're then in a space of like, oh, we can refer business. Oh my God, that's so funny. I know this person too. I know this person. And what we've learned over time is like what Bridget said, like the relationships are really what our like I guess our exchanges are like monetary exchanges. It's more that's like the real payment to us. It's the connection, the connections that bring in leads, that bring in like new listeners, that
Yeah.
excuse me, my like throat is so dry from
Get some
allergy
tea.
season.
Oh,
Allergy season in Florida. My car is green right now. I'm like, oh, this is
really?
interesting. Yeah, there is like a springtime in Florida and it's now. But anyway, just bear with me, everyone. So it's the referrals that we bring in, it's the new listeners, it's the new collaborations, it's the opportunities that will pay you in the long run that you would never have access to if you weren't to have like had a really genuine, authentic conversation with somebody on the show. So these are the things that we're really thinking about. It's like, I understand, like, we get it. Like, things can be expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to buy new mics. It's expensive to buy softwares to like create cool social media clips. Like, we understand. But typically, when you have a podcast, it's because you already have a brand and you're just using this as another avenue to build brand awareness or build your personal brand. So, really, it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, for like the guest to be paying to fund your show.
Yeah. Here's a devil's advocate question. So there's a huge like documentary series. It's like a health documentary series with like a lot of very uh pronounced and like important people, we can say. That what they did charge for that, right? To be part of this like huge documentary series. Now, is there a point at which production cost, because obviously to produce an entire documentary is a little different than a podcast, in my opinion. Like, is that worth it to pay for? So, yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
I think it's more about like industry norms right now too. So like TV in general, I don't think is making the same amount of money as it did. And I
Right.
know for a fact that like editorial isn't making the same amount of money. It's the same concept. Like magazines aren't, doing well, print is dead as we know. And so for products to get featured online in magazines, they typically need to have some sort of like affiliate link on the back end, which
Yeah.
like by the way, if you have a product. And so that's like a little hush hush, but that's kind of what's happening in editorial right now. Now with TV, kind of similarly, people are moving away from traditional channels, moving over to streaming platforms like Netflix, like X, Y, and Z. They have different types of payment structures and different types of structures just in general. So as these types of like industries are shifting,
Yeah.
I think that's where people are expecting, the industries are expecting those to pay more. TV is also very different from a podcast show. So TV, if you're launching a new series, you're putting a lot on the line. There's a lot of production costs and it might fall flat. Like Netflix might not pick it up or they might just do a pilot and that's that.
Yeah.
And so it's just like a different structure where I think docu-series, I'm assuming this is TV, right?
I don't know if it's like mainstream TV.
Was it filmed or is it just
Yeah.
a conversation
Yeah,
online?
no, it's like a filmed
Okay.
documentary series of each person. They had this whole like red carpet.
Yeah.
thing, like event. It was different. So, but I do agree. Podcasts are a little bit different, a little bit like more low key, casual.
They're casual, they're low cost, and
Yeah.
also if you're the shows that are charging guests are either two things. They're either an insanely popular show where they're trying to like weed out some people. And this, I'm talking like these are the top of the top shows. And even some of those are free. So I'm talking about like a small percentage. Typically, they're backed by production companies or they're backed by like a bigger company. So it might not be an individual. Or they are a show that is not making any money and they're trying to charge to get people to get to make money. Okay. There's like literally no middle ground. So there's so many shows that are in the middle or on the upper caliber that aren't charging because they're like, why would I charge for a guest to come on? That's literally the reason why my listeners are here. And I'm building more brand exposure, more awareness because they're bringing their guests or they're bringing their listeners and their audience onto my show. And it's just making it bigger, which then I can create more advertising space and all of that stuff. So that's my opinion on that.
Well, I think this is a good one. I think you brought up two really good points. It's like if you have a really, really big show with a huge listenership, okay, I see why you could justify charging someone. If you have 1 million downloads per episode, chances are pretty high that if I pay to get on that show, something is going to come toward me, whether it is
100%.
opportunities, sales, people, followers, like whatever the metric that matters to you that you're promoting, likely that would be the case. But what we're seeing is usually on the other end, it is shows that have no following that are charging people. So that's where I think it gets iffy. And it's like that summit that I, spoke at 5, 6, 7 years ago. Who even knows how long ago that was at this point? There were some people in the audience, I will say. There were some people there. Now, did it bring me exactly what I wanted? No, not at all. I did get some practice reps in. So, hey, if that's going to be like there's no right or wrong answer, but it has to be for you. And we're talking about this today so that you can understand what's behind the curtain of does this make sense for me? Because what we talked about too, Lydia, before was if someone has a really, really big listenership, there are other ways to monetize it
Yes.
besides charging the guest.
Right, exactly. Like there are sponsorship like spots. How many times have you heard one of your favorite shows get like sponsored by Athletic Greens or Liquid IV
Of
or
course.
Element or all of those brands, right? There's like a lot of brands that really prefer the podcast like advertising space. I think they're genius because the conversion rate's so high. But they really prefer that. And so they'll look at the numbers and then they'll decide to advertise on the shows, right? And then there's the shows that are asking to charge the guest, and people do actually pay. But when you look at I think they're like riding on their guests as
Mm,
I think they're riding on their guests as like the biggest like metrics of success.
mm.
When in my opinion, the metrics of success for that is like, yeah, of course, to be in good company with the guests, but like how many downloads are there?
Yeah.
There are shows out there that actually don't have good download numbers. They just might have some friends that are like high profile experts. And so they're riding on them to charge money. When in reality, if you go on like Listen Notes or you go on Raphonic or all these different tools, you can see the percentage of the podcast in the world, like ranking. You can also see the listenership. I think another thing is to also look at the Instagram followings and see, or TikTok or whatever, and see where they're sitting there. Like I recently had somebody respond to one of my pitches and she was like, yeah, so we're charging $1,000 per episode. I'm looking at her page and I'm like, all right, she's got 20,000 followers. Are these bought? Because her engagement's not high.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and like, let me look at the downloads. I see the downloads are super minimal. And then I realized that this is more of an industry show than it is like for customers to come and purchase things. It's more of
Yeah.
like an industry show where it's like other industry experts are chatting. So like, is this going to give my client the ROI that they want if they were to pay? In my opinion, that's a no. So of course I let her make that decision, but there's just different ways to like measure this and also like different ways to monetize your show. There's also like Patreon if you want
Yep.
to start on like lower ticket.
I
That's a
think even
great
some of the
way to do
podcast
it.
hosting platforms will allow you to charge money through through them if you have certain like downloads and numbers there. So there are so many other ways
Yeah.
versus charging the guest.
Yes. I also keep hearing, let me know if you know what this is. I'll listen to like Jay Shetty's show, for example, and I'll hear like a traditional commercial. I think I heard like something that doesn't make sense for his show at all because he's like all about health and wellness, like mind, body, soul vibes. And I'm pretty sure it's like McDonald's or something. And I'm like,
He's
I'm
like, get your
like,
burger today.
and I was like, this feels like TV. It's so interesting how TV is starting to infiltrate podcasts because I think
Yeah.
they're noticing that this is where people are hanging out. Um, and so I think you can toggle on like if you have a certain amount of downloads on
Mhm.
Apple, you must be able to like toggle on just like
Yeah.
traditional ads.
And what I
But
noticed about the traditional ads then is I don't know if it's the software they're using, but it's always what would the word be? Like it's in live time. So it's not like an old ad from you could be listening to an old
yeah,
episode, but it's not an old ad. It's like a newer ad. So it must be whatever software they're using where they can just like insert the ads into it. I don't know
yeah,
how it
I
works.
literally think they like toggle on and then it's like you could just they'll just have like a few minutes before the show that's like some sort of platform that like does something. And then speaking of, there's YouTube also. If you post your podcast on YouTube, Bridget, do you want to tell everyone how much your like uncle is making?
Oh my God, I don't even know the stats. My uncle's a dentist, and during COVID, he got super into YouTube, and he's making side money from YouTube now. Like shorts are doing really well, and guys, he's showing people like a denture. You know what I mean? Like people will look up any. I mean, I'm the person who looks up everything on YouTube, so there's so much opportunity on YouTube because it's a search engine. I am like a ride or die YouTuber, and one thing I will say, this is a little bit of a tangent, but one thing I do notice about people are sometimes funny with ads, though. So there's a channel I listen to or watch, and it's kind of like a lifestyle channel. And how do the listeners think that those people make money? They make money through brand deals and sponsorships and ads,
Yeah.
and people get pissed at them for having the ad. I'm like, guys, how do you think they're funding this entire, like, people are just, they don't know. But I'm like, interesting. So people are a little funny. And I will say with the ads like you're talking about in Jay Shetty's, I like when they read it themselves. Like Joe Rogan like reads
Me
it
too.
himself. I like that a little more versus like some random voice just coming in and being like, buy your burger today.
Yeah, I agree. But I do think some of them are hilarious. Like speaking on this topic, where obviously they're getting paid. There's like certain podcasts I'll listen to where they're like, this is my favorite flavor of this supplement. I take it every single morning. And this is like the 80th brand that they've talked about this year. And I'm like, there's no effing way that you are taking all of your sponsors every single day. I don't even, there's no way. And
No
it's
way.
all like supplement brands, drinks, like food. I'm like, no way. So it just like cracks me up because I think like, authentically, I'm sure they like the brand or an integrity, but it's just like it definitely is kind of like a like a blurred space. I mean, as things change and evolve, it's just that's just what happens. But
Well,
I
yeah.
am happy for people that like personal brands that are able to advertise honestly. I saw on TikTok actually this girl that was she was like the girls that are posting the cringe videos, they have 100, followers and they're trying to be an influencer and then they stop posting. Bitch, what happened? And she was like, we're out here cheering you on. We all had to start somewhere. Like, keep going, keep going. If you want to do that and you want to make this your career, it's not cringe. And I just thought it was such a cute, like devil's advocate, like
Yeah.
to see it from another perspective, because everyone's going to be a hater in some way or
True.
another. So it's just like pick your poison, I think. But at the end of the day, I think as a business owner, I see it so differently. I'll see
Yeah.
like a YouTuber talking about like a brand, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. I'm like happy for them that they got this brand deal.
I agree. And when it makes sense for their brand, I do like it. Because I do think
Yes.
some of these people do use the products, but I think where that gray area you're talking about is that
Hmm.
it's kind of gone to the extreme. And
Yeah.
like you're saying, okay, she's 80 supplements. That girl's digestive system is gonna be screwed with those 80 things
Yeah.
that she's taking at once. Like
Yeah.
that's not healthy either. So there is like a fine line. And yes, you would hope that there is authenticity in what those companies are choosing. You know, it's funny. I was I was feeding the baby before, and I like to watch YouTube shorts because it's not like anyone I know or see, and it just feels like, I don't know, my own little bubble. But I think her name is like Brett. I don't know, it's this girl named Brett something, and she was talking about Julia Roberts and how people are giving Julia Roberts a lot of like crap over the years because she's put down said no to a lot of roles where it would be like nudity, kissing, like it just went against her values. And this girl Brett was commenting that she really respected that, but there was of course haters being like, why wouldn't you do this, blah blah blah. But I love that like we have to stick to our values, but how do you know someone's values? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
How do you know someone's values? That's true. Wait, I actually, speaking on this topic, Spencer and I went down like a rabbit hole the other day. We were driving to the Super Bowl or a Super Bowl party, viewing party, and I don't know how we got like on a deep conversation about politics and like our 20-minute drive. And I was like, it's kind of crazy. It felt like a high thought where people are just like really like zooming out. But I was like, it's kind of interesting how ethics are can be measured in so many different ways because I could have a different upbringing or come from a different culture and something could be seen as good or bad or values can be so insanely different.
Mm,
Whereas like somebody else brought up in a different culture or a different upbringing might say, no, that is a good thing or no, that is a bad thing. So yeah, values definitely are personal.
yeah.
And ethics can also be in a sliding scale too
Yeah,
when it
it's all
comes to like brands
subjective.
and business.
Mm, so interesting. So,
I
so
know.
interesting.
Think
So,
about that, everyone.
yeah, these high thoughts. I'm high on my coffee that's now cold that is from 6 a.m. this morning and
Yeah,
it's now
meanwhile,
almost
our high thoughts are high and leave.
truthfully. Yeah, I said
Yeah,
that.
it's so funny. Me and my assistant were talking the other day, and we were just like, I really like to just be in my own right mind and just
Yeah.
be in control.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Well,
how
I
I feel.
haven't drank anything for 10 months. I had like
Yeah.
a sip of a dry cider and I was like, it's nice, but I don't know. I just like to be in my body and feel good.
Feel good. Yes. I had my first glass of wine this week in
Oh
like a
yeah,
month
because
and
you
a
did dry
half.
January.
Yeah, I did dry January, and then I also like got the flu the end of December, so I wasn't drinking.
Yeah. How'd you feel
Yeah.
after your one glass of wine?
I'm gonna be honest, it was really delicious and I
Yeah.
loved it. But
Yes.
I'm gonna go back on the dry train.
I
Why?
know.
For funsies.
For fun. I mean, it is cool that we are living in a time with so many non-alcoholic options. Like
Options, yeah.
there's lots that you can do these
So
days and still feel fun.
so many places have mocktails now, but I
Yep.
will say total effing ripoff. Like
Absolutely.
there's no alcohol in here. What are we charging for? I had the most delicious mocktail the other day. It was $9. I was like, oh my God.
I've seen like 12 to 14, which is absolutely bizarre.
Isn't that
Bizarre.
crazy? If
Yeah.
you look at their cocktail menu with alcohol, it'll say like $14. Without, it's 9. I'm like, this is literally soda water and like a garnish.
Should we get into the mocktail business? Because
Yes,
apparently people are paying. I mean, right? It always comes down to
people
what
are
are people
paying.
willing to pay for? Pay me for
Speaking
my
of,
$15 mocktail.
which is why I think people are willing to pay for guest spots. They think that they need to buy their visibility. But this is, and I'm so happy we had this conversation today because I think it's a lot about like just debunking what is happening like behind the curtains,
Mm,
what is possible for you. Anyone listening to this show that wants to be a guest, there are so many podcasts out there. There's literally thousands. I love that there's podcasts. There's like just millions of podcasts that have a spot for everybody and a community for everybody because there's so many of them that will allow you to be on their show for free and the ROI it will be much greater. So if you're just starting out and you see a price tag, I think the best thing to do is if you want to get your reps in, go for different shows where you don't have to pay. We
yep.
do think that there's times when paying is appropriate, but just measure the ROI on it. If you're a product brand, you're coming in and you just want to speak on your products, that's an advertising budget. And so we say, heck yeah, if it's the
Yep.
right podcast, go for it. I saw a podcast the other day that was just for CPG brands, huge listenership. They charge $1,000 an episode, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I was like, all right.
I love that. I think this is good. It is really is debunking. I actually wrote down you said you don't need to buy your visibility. Totally true. And hey, if you are the podcast host who is charging, maybe this conversation is just like kind of opening your eyes. Maybe it still works for you, but hey, think about it. you might have a you might not charge someone to come on your show. You have a great conversation with that guest. They end up paying you for your services because you built the relationship first. Like that is also very, very possible. And it's happened directly to us.
So speaking of, how many people have actually like bought our program that were guests on the show?
Many, and that was never our intention. Like I know
Never.
people do that though. People,
Yeah,
that is a strategy, which it
really.
usually feels a little weird, that one. Like you've seen people who are like, "Come on my show," but then they try to sell you afterward. Like they literally try. They'll like email you like a whole thing, or they'll have a conversation with you at the end. Have you ever?
I don't think I've been on any of those shows, but I see it, I feel it, I don't love it.
No, it's
No.
inauthentic. So
Yeah.
luckily, we are just here having a good time on our
Yeah.
talk show. This is really just the Bridget and Lydia talk show at this point. We hope you like it.
Yeah. We hope you love it. We talk about our personal life. We throw in some visibility. We'll talk about our high thoughts that are not high at all. You
Right.
know, we just come with us on the journey.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a great time. Well, this was fun, Lydia. I love doing this with you every single week. I always have just like a blast. So glad to be back.
Oh, yay. I'm so happy that you're back. If you have any questions on, podcasts, if anyone is asking you to charge or something like that, I mean, I'm curious to just hear. So feel free to like slide into our DMs on Instagram. If you listen to this episode, I actually, I posted my rant on LinkedIn. Maybe I'll just like post my little rant underneath in the
Yeah, it's
episode
a
show
great idea.
notes. Yes,
Perfect.
people can read it. I feel like I like wrote it out better than I spoke it out, but that's okay. But I did have some random person come into my DMs on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, Lydia, this was really interesting. Thank you so much for posting this because I personally am thinking about charging my guests. I would love your perspective."
Yeah.
And I said, "Go for it, fire away. Thanks so much for your message." I did look up his show. I don't think you should charge. But anyway, I mean, he came in so sweet, and I would,
Yeah.
of course, graciously come back with my education on why maybe he wants to weigh his pros and cons for
And
that.
that's such a great point. Like it can be well-meaning. Like we're not saying that
Of
people
course.
who are charging are these like evil people. Like
No.
they're it's a usually people are running a business and to have a business you need to make money. So we got it. Great
No.
conversation. I love this topic and I really loved your post. So great job. Great writing job.
My goodness. Thanks, Bridget.
You're so
Thank you,
welcome.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. We'll see you next time.